In other words, the equity that you had in that asset has been lost, and effectively lost to the banks. Because when it comes to the collateral that you used for that mortgage, for that business, who holds that collateral now? In most cases, the banks. So if your home is repossessed, it doesn't matter to the bank if the house is sold for a mere fraction of what you paid for it. It doesn't matter if the house was sold for a whole lot less than its true worth, because they will just pocket whatever they can get for it, and they will write off whatever the amount is that's outstanding on your loan, on your mortgage. Another major factor in the initiation by the central bank to turn off credit, this has now been used as an excuse and justification for unbelievable government handouts, allegedly to support the banking system, allegedly to prevent banks from going down. Nothing can be further from the truth. It means that the banks, through these government handouts, have achieved more and more resource, more and more money, have created banks which are now much bigger than they were beforehand. And keep in mind that all of this has been done with the acquiescence of governments and politicians. In the same way that we have seen the acquiescence of governments and politicians to the deliberate hiking of oil and fuel prices well prior to the instigation of the credit crunch in 2007. You'll remember that the hike in fuel prices was a major factor in the increase in costs within the economies, cost of production, cost of transport, which permeated through every aspect of our economies. The Voice of the World reported well before this hike in fuel prices and oil prices, made it very clear that it was an action by the oil industry done with the full knowledge of government, because if it was brought to our attention well before it happened, then I can assure you that the government were absolutely well aware of the fact. Please keep in mind that in order for it to have its desired effect, the credit crunch needs to be in place for the required length of time, probably 3 to 4 years, in order for it to have its desired effect. In order for the banks to be able to complete this major revamp of their balance sheets and their debt to equity ratios, in order to be able to restart the process all over again. The entire process has increased the wealth of banks, particularly when you have regard to the fact that we have seen unprecedented levels of government handouts to be able to enable them to reinforce their position, consolidate the base that they have to work from. I referred earlier to the profits that had been made by the banking system prior to the invoking and the initiation of the credit crunch. As we can see with what's happened in recent times with regard to bonuses paid by banks, that in itself tells you that the banks are not in the financial dilemma that they would have us believe. The banks are not in the financial dilemma and the position that politicians would have us believe. And even worse, and even more iniquitous, only yesterday it was announced that the banks have now ramped the interest rates on credit cards to unprecedented levels. We are told that the central bank rate is at an all-time low to try and assist the banks get through the credit crunch. It's about 0.5% from the central bank. But we have banks who are charging 18 and 20% interest on credit cards. We have a very old saying in Australia: if you can't blind them with science, then baffle them with bullshit. New terminology has been invented for the benefit of the mass of the population who don't understand what's going on, who are blind to what the banking system and the governments have been up to. Some of this new terminology can be demonstrated by what is described as being quantitative easing. Quantitative easing, they called it. Simply, once again, the creation of money from nothing to hand out to the banking system to reinforce their already dominant, already powerful, their already wealthy position